Welcome, everybody. It's Tony Caldwell, and welcome to another edition of the Uncaptive Agency, where we're talking about the future of insurance distribution. It is May of 2021, as I'm talking with my guest today, Michael Jans from Cave Creek, Arizona, and we're talking about what we think is going to happen in the insurance distribution industry over the next 3 to 5 years. Probably everybody, Michael, that is listening to us today knows who you are from your insurance profit systems days and all of the work you've done in marketing and consulting to the independent insurance agency force for the last 25 or 30 years. But for those who don't know what you're doing right now, and by the way, welcome today, give us just a thumbnail sketch of what Michael Jans is up to today.
What am I up to today really is not significantly different than what I've been up to for, like you said, 25 or 30 years, paying attention to one question. You know, between you and I, Tony, and I don't know if anybody else is listening, but between you and I, this is not the question that I thought, you know, when I was growing up, I thought I'd be like focusing my time and attention on, but here we are, right? And so, yeah, that question is that I keep pursuing. Is what makes independent insurance agencies grow. So, and what I've recognized is that, because I've been, like you said, I've been in the space for probably about 30 years. When I got into the space, something that occurred to me, at that point, I was the executive vice president of the PIA affiliates on the western side of the United States, is that there was a kind of the industry was a little bit of a one-trick pony when it came to organic growth, which was generally, if somebody wanted to grow, what did they do? Hire producers. And the other elements of organic growth, they just weren't really mature in the industry. And so that was fascinating to me. I'd been in a situation where I had to grow or die. And when I first turned, it was when I was running the PIA. Those affiliates were really in quite some trouble. And so I turned to the leaders of the association, independent insurance agents. I said, how do you grow, right? Because I needed to sell membership. I needed to sell E&O insurance. I needed to sell education. And the kind of answers I got were like, well, you know, we got a great reputation, or we take really good care of our people, or we've been around since 1925. And I thought, that's it. That's the best you could give me. And so I did, fortunately, crack the code on organic growth with the affiliates that I was working with, but then also began to share some of the insights that I had. So what am I doing now? Living outside of Cave Creek, next to 3 million acres of national forest, enjoying a fairly quiet lifestyle. I sold my interest in my InsurTech agency Revolution almost 4 years ago. I can't believe that. And I took some time off, other than maintaining some private clients and maintaining a mastermind group that would come here to my casita. I really took some time off to reflect on what's happening in the industry. I maintained my podcast, the Connected Insurance Podcast, and I just kept asking them the same question. What's happening in the industry? What are the trends and forces that are shaping the industry? What does that mean to the leadership of the agency system, and how should they behave? What should they do differently? So I've been doing that. And then very recently, I realized that I could only reach so many people with private client relationships, which tend to be distributed between some insurtechs and fast growth agencies. But my time is limited. My fees were kind of, maybe out of the reach of the average agency. So I wanted one last time, I wanted to make a difference in the industry. So I launched what I call the Next Level Organic Growth Program, which guides people in a sequential path from wherever they are right now to the next level. So that's what I'm up to.
Okay, all right. Well, it sounds like it's the theme is the same, but perhaps the music is richer and fuller and more nuanced.
I think we're better. I mean, let's face it. You pay attention to something for 25 years. If this year isn't different than the last year, then you really weren't paying attention. So I think we're delivering some really good strategies and tactics.
So you mentioned that when you joined the PIA, the industry was focused on growing through producers. And, I talk to lots of agency owners who have lots and lots of questions about hiring and managing and compensating producers. So in many respects, I think that many folks in the industry still think that's the way to grow. Now, obviously, you taught a lot of people how to be marketers as well as producers. But as you think about the future, is doing this one at a time with human beings the best way to grow, the way many agencies still seem to think, or is it a whole new way of marketing? What's your opinion?
Yeah, well, that's a great question, and I'm going to be I'm going to be really careful. I don't want to throw producers under the bus. I think that they provide an outstanding service to the market and to the industry. They provide advocacy, education, expertise, just like an agency does. And generally, they also have to get new clients, right? And so, my perspective on the producer is that today's producer, the contemporary producer, the producer in the modern age of insurance, well, they shouldn't be functioning like they did in 1995, right? Just like an agency shouldn't be functioning like they did in 1995, because the world around us has changed. Technology's changed, consumer behavior's changed. And so I still respect the producer. However, the producer can, like other small and medium businesses, they can do a lot of the same things. So in other words, if a producer is responsible, let's say, for customer acquisition, well, they don't have to make cold calls as the only form of acquisition, right? They can create a presence in the marketplace. They can create value in the marketplace. They can obviously market to the marketplace. They can communicate and attract attention, deliver value, and they can design a relatively simple marketing funnel that attracts people to them and draws them closer to them, so that using technology and good content through that technology, people can, good prospects can come to them, not saying, "Hey, Tony, I want a free quote." It's, "Hey, Tony, what would it take to do business with you? Because I've already decided in my heart that you're the guy." And so from a producer's point of view, that's just pure beauty for customer acquisition. Closing ratios higher, and you can get better quality clients. But then after the customer acquisition is executed, well, that's, I think a lot of producers or a lot of agencies thinks that, like, that's the touchdown, but really that's the scrimmage line. Like, now we get to have fun. And so that relationship with the client becomes the beginning of a process to generate maximum customer lifetime value, right? And that customer lifetime value, Bain did some research on this a few years ago that I thought was stunning. I mean, it kind of confirmed what I was seeing and feeling in the marketplace, but the numbers they put behind it were stunning. What they determined was that if you could earn the loyalty of an insurance client, they'd renew at 97%, they'd generate 2.5 referrals, they'd buy 25% more insurance, and they're like literally 6 times more likely to buy another policy in the coming 12 months than a low loyalty client. So what they determined was that a highly loyal insurance client delivers 7 times the lifetime value of a low loyalty client and 3 times the lifetime value of a mid loyalty client. Well, when I really sort of grasped the magnitude of that number, I thought, oh, okay, you want to make money in the insurance industry? Okay, you got to do 2 things and do them really, really well. One is you have to have a good lead generation system, and 2, you need a good customer journey, and a journey that creates loyalty and then stimulates the reward for that loyalty with referrals and account rounding and longer retention.
And so none of that's new, and it's perfectly common sense. It's hard to understand for me, why so few people who get paid for selling insurance in our industry are actually really producers. You know, I was having dinner in Carmel the other night with my wife at a famous yet mediocre restaurant, and I was watching the poor job that the wait staff was doing, and you know, after having a not very good meal, I got asked the typical question, which is, "Would you like some dessert?" And I wanted just to reach out to this poor girl and say, you know, that is the completely wrong question. You're not asking me the right question. I mean, you know, no, I don't want any dessert because you haven't made me want any. You know, instead, why don't you do something with some showmanship to make it impossible for me to resist having dessert? Because you know what, you're going to get 15% of however big my check is, or 20 if you're doing a better job. You know, I learned early in high school as a waiter that the bigger the check, the more money I made, because people were going to pay me what they were going to pay me based on what their bill was. And so I'm still bumfuzzled why people who get paid commission in the independent insurance agency industry don't understand that. You know, theoretically, they're better trained, better educated than a waiter was in this mediocre restaurant, but they still don't get the concept of, gosh, if I sell people more stuff, I get paid more. Why do you think that's so hard to understand?
I have a bit of a theory about about what I think this problem is. And I think it's because we're probably psychologically wired this way. When we get a new customer, everybody gets excited about it. You know, so if the producer, like, you know, brings in a big account, the principal might pat him on the back, and maybe if he's got a good relationship with the CSRs, you know, it's like, hey, great job. And yet, you know, maybe that night, 337 policies got downloaded into the agency management system, and nobody cared, right? It's like it was like, but when you think about it, hey, I'll take what happened last night over what happened this afternoon with the new sale any day of the week. And so I think, you know, and the same thing happens on the inbound call. You know, let's say an account exec or a CSR, you know, gets an inbound call. Maybe they do a good job. They follow the script, or they really stick with the philosophy of the agency, and boom, you know, half an hour later, you know, they've got 3 policies, and boy, you know, it's like Sally or Nancy or Fred. Hey, great job. You know, maybe it goes on the whiteboard or something. 3 policies. That's great. And so I think in general, there's just more, because it's new. There's a shock of energy. And yet, where the real wealth and equity is developed is in the quiet stuff that doesn't ever, like, there's very few parties around it. You know, there's not a lot of celebrations around it. It's that slow, gradual work of building a really great customer journey, training people in the philosophy of the agency. Helping people create deeper, longer relationships, and all those secret things that happen at night when you're downloading all of your customers.
So the agency that wants to grow into the future, into a modern agency, what do they focus on first? Do they need to change the way they're paying people so that they reward folks for the results they want, which are some things you described? Or do they do that with technology and keep treating people the same? I mean, how does that change? In other words, you know, most customer service people who are frequently responsible in the agency for account rounding and upselling after the producers, you know, hit the first ball out of the park or whatever, they're typically paid primarily on salary, not commission, and they're typically recruited for nurturing skills much more so than sales skills. So does the agency of the future need to change its philosophy about the kinds of folks it hires in its service department to be successful? Or does it change the way it's paying them? Both? Something else? What do you think?
Yeah, well, I'm not sure that there's a single answer to that, but so I'll walk through the approaches that I've seen really matter, and one that doesn't. Here's the one that doesn't. You know, provide a little bump of an incentive, like, oh, bonus every time you get a cross sell, or we're going to give you a little more commission. And then think that's it. It's like, oh, we announced a new program, and this is a program that's automatically going to help us grow, and you're going to feel great about it. And the fact is, it doesn't. It's the role of leadership. That program may be really useful if it's founded upon good principles, but the coaching and the mentoring, the incentivizing, the encouragement, occasionally the termination when it's appropriate. That's the job of leadership that has to be part of their participation in the agency every single day. So the incentives, useful, but I don't think anybody should like fool themselves into thinking like, oh, my nifty new program is going to change their psychology. Now, I think that in my experience, because I've trained thousands of CSRs, and I trained them in how to close more inbound calls, how to cross-sell more existing customers, how to generate more referrals, and how to deliver the kind of experience that retains clients longer, those 4 things. And in my experience, when you can really engage the heart and mind of, let's say, a CSR, generally they have a psychological orientation that encourages them or compels them to take good care of people, right? But if you say, hey, we're going to send you to sales training, they're like, no, I don't want to do sales training. That's not why I'm here. And so it does require, I think it requires a real heart-to-heart conversation around what's our mission, what's our purpose, what are we here to do? Without too much engagement, I think we'll all come to the conclusion we're here to take care of our customers, which means protect them. That's our job, right? As professionals, it's to lead them to make the best decisions they can about purchasing the protection that they need. And so, to have a conversation with a CSR about, hey, how would you feel, or how do you feel when a customer has a gap and they have a claim and they get hurt by that claim? Maybe it really was some serious damage to their income, certainly to their peace of mind. Maybe they call their lawyer, and their lawyer sends a magic letter to the agency that says, we think we should have been covered, or something like that. How do you feel about that? They feel terrible about that. They don't want that to happen. And so this is where I think the dichotomy between, oh, we need to be a sales organization or a service organization, really is a little bit fuzzy. It's maybe not quite the right metaphor. The metaphor I use is that we need to be a customer organization, and we need to take care of customers, and the ethical thing, just like a doctor's job is, they have an ethical responsibility to take care of your health. We have some ethical responsibility to take care of the protection that they've got. And so from that point of view, yes, I'm motivated to see that you've got the umbrella, or whatever it is that you need that you're not thinking of right now. So I think so like core to the entire thing. I mean, yes, we can talk about technology, we can talk about the technique, but like core is this sort of the strategic philosophy, which is that it's like we're in business to do one thing and one thing only: protect as many people as we can, as well as we can.
It's really interesting you talk about philosophy. Another way of saying that is, what are your values, or, what's your mission? And I find that people give that short shrift. In fact, they don't even really think about it when they start their agency, often as they operate their agency, or they felt like they come up with some really formulaic sort of thing, but it doesn't come from the heart. It's not something they really thought through. Consequently, their culture is amorphous. Their mission is not defined. And then, they fall back on the truisms or the platitudes, but, what's your unique selling proposition? And they say the same thing as everybody else because they haven't got anything else to say, which is we have great service and,
all the same answers I got 25, 30 years ago.
Exactly. So, we recently did a strategic plan at a bank that I'm the chairman of the board of, and we spent 2 days really getting clear about values. And it was a bizarre thing for some of the people, like, I thought we were here to talk about, how much we want to grow. Well, first we got to get the foundation right. And it was an interesting conversation because there were a lot of strong feelings elicited through the whole conversation over a couple of days about why are we here? yeah, we want to make money, but how do we do that and why? And so in your work with agencies, do you think that that's why, I mean, is that where you begin, and is it any different now than it was over the last 25 years, or is it the same struggle?
Well, I do think it's the same struggle in a very different world. Okay, so maybe 20 years ago, my most read report, I think it was online. My most downloaded report at that point in time was a report I called 21 Ways to Write a Killer Yellow Pages Ad. Okay,
I remember that.
Yeah, right. There you go. And so back then I did a little bit of travel. We had conferences around the country, and I'd check into the hotel. I'd pull out the yellow pages. I'd look under insurance, and I'd say, "Oh, yeah, that's one of my guys, right? Oh, yeah, okay, that guy's one of my guys," because I could tell. I mean, the nature of the kind of advertising I was encouraging was just really radically different than the average. Which is, kind of a, case in point. Most agents, said, "Oh," to the Yellow Pages rep, "Oh, you write the ad." It's like, okay. And so now, obviously, that's the loneliest report in the world. Nobody's asking for a copy of that one. And so now we do live in a world where the the communication media are myriad, they're numerous, and new ones every day. And our competitors are using them really, really very effectively. Our customers are using them every single day. And so that's a skill set that's, guess what? It's no longer new, but it opens up huge opportunities for agencies if they can understand couple of things. First, the power of contemporary technologies. And, there's a little bit of a learning curve. There's some things you've got to understand, but this isn't rocket science. It's not going to take 4 years of, education to get there. There are a few things there. And then the other thing is the messaging that is delivered through those technologies, and how you can weave those things together and deliver those messages in many ways very automatically, and actually amplify your sense of presence, and amplify your sense of humanity, amplify that sense of transparency and realness. And you can do it in front of thousands or tens of thousands of people, really very quickly, very powerfully, and move them along an elegant customer journey. So yeah, it's a little bit today's world, like when I, because yes, in my focus on organic growth, there are a few things that agencies need to learn that they didn't have to worry about 10 or 15 years ago, but that's just the nature of the world. And I think if we pay attention to them, they're not hard to learn, they're easy to execute, and the rewards are really very, they're very rich.
So, you've focused on organic growth for much of your career, and you've seen a lot of people and a lot of different kinds of results. I'm curious, set a bench line or benchmark for us, and say, hey, if you're in this business seriously, what's the minimum acceptable level of performance for an agency from the standpoint of organic growth?
Well, that's an interesting question. I mean, that the average agency, I don't have last year's figures yet, but I got the previous years from Tom Duran over at Reagan, and it was like 4.6, okay, for the previous year.
Mm-hmm.
And now,
that's not the organic growth number. That's the premium and commission growth number, which
right. Okay. Yeah, I'm doing my best to arrive at a number, and it may be too generous. Okay. And now, so now just to put this in perspective, after 10 plus years after I launched my training program, Insurance Profit Systems and Quantum Club, I launched an InsurTech, a startup.
Mm-hmm.
80+% of startups fail. And so when you take that risk on, you do it more or less with the full knowledge that 4.6% growth will not cut it, right?
Right.
And so you have to scale. You've got to go from zero to now you got to take care of you may not get paid, but you got to pay everybody who works for you, and you got to take care of all your expenses, and then you got to get it to the next level. And so that's a world where doubling your growth annually, maybe you'll be okay, but maybe not. Right now, in an agency, double growth, that's just extremely rare. However, an acceptable number, tough to say, but I've worked with clients who have had, let's say 35% average annual growth for 10 plus years. Like I'm working with a client now, I think 13 years in a row, between 30 and 40. Maybe the fastest growing personal lines agency in the country, right? Because there's just not a lot of people that can pull that off. But with focus and discipline and the right tools, this guy is not doing anything that nobody else can't do. He's just executing on it. That being said, I like, my definition for scale in the independent insurance agency system is 25.89% per year, because it's a magic number, because if you grew that much every year for 10 years, you'd be 10 times the size you are. So right. If you got a $3 million agency, by 2031, you could have a $30 million agency. That's possible at that growth rate. And that's high, but we take a look at, there are 4 numbers that I ask people to take a look at. And each one of them pertains to a different stage in the marketing, my 4-stage marketing model, okay? Number 1 is, how many leads did we get? Well, if we have a system that gets more, then we'll have more leads coming to the second stage, which is conversion. How many of them did we turn into customers? Well, if we train our account executives and CSRs and provide sales training for the producers and manage them well, that number goes up. And then the third number is, what's our policy per customer count? Or an alternate number, what's our revenue per customer? But let's say we're measuring policy per customer. Well, if we're really generating loyalty and we are stimulating a response to that loyalty with cross-sell campaigns, annual reviews, increased policy sale at the point of sale, increase cross-selling at the point of service. There's a lot we can do there. And then the 4th stage if we can increase our retention by nurturing, by engaging, by communicating, by demonstrating value, by making, but maybe by providing enough innovation that your customers are thinking, no, I wouldn't go anywhere else. I mean, that's the relationship I have with the agency that's been taking care of me for 20 plus years, right? No, I don't want to go anywhere else. If you can tweak those 4, you don't even have to turn them upside down and go crazy with it. If you tweak all 4 of those numbers, you will have dramatic growth compared to the previous year.
Yep. So, I'm well known as an optimist, and we started our conversation, actually, before we started recording it, about, an optimistic view that we both share about the future of the industry. So I wanted just to set that as a caveat, but also to say, I have a theory about the next 4 or 5 years, and it is that a lot of agencies that are now in business won't be. And that'll happen for 2 reasons. One, some of them are going to get bought up. The acquisition binge is just going nuts. I mean, Acrisure raised $3.5 billion last month, and they're just one of dozens of people buying agencies. So that'll shrink but what that means is the job gets tougher for every agency that doesn't get bought out, because they're bringing huge amounts of talent, ability, and capital to the dance. So for an agency to thrive in the future, my theory is they have to be better than in the past. They can't get away with the same kinds of stuff that they've got away with in the past. And so I also believe that you can't hit what you don't aim at. And so one of the things I see agents not doing is setting, really clear goals for things like growth. And then the corollary to that is that, people like Elon Musk, for example. I mean, he's a he got where he got, and other people won't get where they get because they set big goals, big, hairy, audacious goals. And so there's nothing wrong with that because you can't hit what you don't aim at. So your 25%, 24.89% goal as or number for organic growth is really interesting. The other thing so I think that if you can't set a goal of 15 to 20% over a decade, which means probably in the first 3 years of your business, you've got to be growing 40%, 35 to 50% per year in the first 3 years. And maybe you slow that down to 35 to 25%, and then maybe 15 to 20 after that. If you don't set those kinds of goals, you don't develop the capabilities to be competitive into the future because the game gets harder, not easier. That's my thought. What do you think of that?
I think that the the future of the industry belongs to the ones who know how to grow. Tony, neither of us are kids in this industry. I recall conversation I had with George Nordhaus, a name you very likely remember. Okay, this is back when George was quite active, right? And he said when he got cranking, right, he had a list of 80,000. He figured there were reasonably 80,000 independent insurance agencies. Now, so back in the 70s, let's say,
right,
okay. Right. Now we went through a soft market and a hard market. We went through the rise of a new generation, the baby boomers, and we went through it's kind of a major technological challenge. It seems minor now, but back then, no. Agency principals were having to decide, are we going to get computers? Yeah. And then they were showing up at, PIA meetings or Big I meetings, and there would be like a battle of the agency management systems, right? And now they had to decide, oh my goodness, are we going to get one of those things, right? So but now we're in a really similar situation. Major technological challenges. We need to learn a lot of new technology. There's a lot of them. We have a rising new generation. Consumer behavior has changed. And, it's always a little bit difficult to predict what the pricing is going to be. But, this is a similar situation. So I think it's not unlikely we'll see some contraction. Well, the boomers are going to sell. So we're going to see a lot of that. Now, at the street level, it doesn't look that different yet. That's, at the street level, whether an agency is owned, by my neighbor, or he sold to some guy in Michigan, that runs a private equity firm, the customer may not know that. However, at some point, I'm expecting somebody to, for it to be dramatically different. But I just haven't seen it. I think so far, we're seeing the private equity firms, really grow as a financial play, right? Acquire and flip and acquire and flip. But at some point, because they're not seeing very positive results on organic growth. In fact, I've heard from reliable sources that there may be, some of them are experiencing negative organic growth, while the very positive inorganic growth.
Right.
But at some point, those agencies, that model matures, and they've got to run real businesses with and really invest in their customer relationships. We better buckle. The average total, the independent, the one who's not owned, they now is the time for them to put their growth plan together, acquire the skills, examine the technologies, and put a plan together that that's reliable for organic growth, or it'll be too late.
Yeah, one of the things that it seems to me that successful agencies have got to do better at going forward than they have in the past is they've got to be better business people. Because first of all, the risks are bigger and the competition is stronger. And the things you've been talking about, like, the planning and really getting very highly focused in on the 4 or 5 things that cause you to grow and the people that you have to do that, all those things, the leadership we talked about earlier, all of that implies that you've got to be a better business person for the next generation of leadership in an agency than in the last generation of leadership in an agency. So, just as you talk to folks in the business that are coming up and the folks that you're dealing with, maybe even in a consulting way, do you see that these are better, sharper, more skilled business people, or are they people still trying to catch up to where the future needs them to be?
Well, I'm not sure that they're like magically that this generation's better. But to case in point, when I reflect back on, the agencies that I've worked with, that just really did scale, right? I mean, they really grew, and maybe they had started this before they had a relationship with me. That was irrelevant. But like the one distinction that I saw common among those who, during the course of their of their career, they 10x'd or more, right? They had a small agency and then they had a really big, maybe they dominated the state or something like that, or dominated niches. The big distinction was that they really perceived of themselves as entrepreneurs, or what I would call an insurerpreneur, first and foremost. And many of those super fast growth agencies had principals who would say, I haven't sold a policy in 25 years. And 25 years ago, they were small. So, there was an early recognition that the business of building systems that run the business was ultimately more important than selling a policy. I honestly, I think that people have the same challenges, and there are lots of distractions. And like a startup or smaller agency, that principal's wearing 17 different hats, but one of them has to be insurerpreneur. They have to be a system builder.
You've mentioned 10xing a couple of different times, and I think when I hear that term, I always think of Dan Sullivan, who is someone you know well, and is my coach for a long time. And he said many years ago that it's easier to grow 10 times than 2 times. And when I first heard that, I thought, well, he's speaking hyperbolically, and then I asked him one day, and I said that to him, and he goes, "No, I'm serious." And then he explained, and Dan runs an organization called the Strategic Coach, which trains entrepreneurs, right? That when you set out to grow 10 times, you have to do things differently than if you're going to grow 2 times. And the whole idea is, do you have a linear mindset or do you have an exponential mindset? And it's back to what you accept or what you set as your goals. Do you set linear goals or do you set really big, hairy, audacious, exponential goals? I don't know if you've had this experience in your life, Michael, but in mine, when I set goals, they tend to happen. And so earlier in my life, I thought, I'm not setting very good goals because I keep hitting them. And so I need to set bigger. Then I hit those too. And what happens is, if you're goal focused, okay, is you do what's required to hit the goal.
Right. And it's often not. And it's I think this would go back to something, Dan Sullivan's point. It's really never like the guy who wants to grow, 10 times as the size. He doesn't get there because he works 10 times more.
No.
He builds a different system.
That's right.
So he looks for, in the world in which he's, operating, where are the points of leverage? Where can I put in a unit of input into the system and get 10 units back? And most people, they're just too busy. And so there's, there is a, it's almost as if the demands of day-to-day operations are the enemy of growth, because they keep wanting you to come back in and take care of the details. And growth wants you to go build a system that takes care of those details for you.
Yeah, so let's help out the guy who's sitting out there thinking, okay, I want to do this. I want to build a really significant business. How do I do that? So what's your best advice? Okay, you want to be an insurance entrepreneur or an how do you say that?
Entrepreneur.
Entrepreneur.
It's
Uh,
not in the dictionary. It's in the Michael Jans
yeah,
dictionary.
I had a friend years ago that sold manure, and he was the manure entrepreneur. So I'm a little okay.
Yeah, well,
All right. So you've got this agency, and you're wearing 17 hats. The most important hat that you're wearing is the entrepreneur hat, the business owner hat, the business person hat. But you're doing all these other things. What's the minimum amount of time in your work week should you spend on the business rather than in the business? Give them a target to hit.
I think this is the approach. Like gaining control, mastering control of your time. That's really critical. And there are some tricks and techniques that I've seen work really, really well over time with that. So I'll share a couple of them. One is a little technique that I've been like teaching for 20 years, and it just really, a lot of people just really glommed onto it. I call it the rule of 46. And essentially all this says is at the end of a month, look back at everything you did that month and see if you can find 5% that you can eliminate, automate, or delegate. That's it, 5%. And the typical entrepreneur is working too many hours, which leads to burnout. So if you take 5% and do that for a month, right, your overall amount of time, will ideally it'll shrink. So you have a little more free time to clear your mind, but you'll free up 46% of your time in 1 year. Now, the average guy thinking, gosh, if I had half my time free right now, I'd be devoting it to really cool stuff. Okay. Right. So even if you took, like, let's say it's out of a 40-hour week and you take, 5%. So now you discovered 2 hours, right? Start there. 2 hours totally focused on building systems with high leverage, right? So focus on marketing, focus on building your team, focus on reviewing and designing the internal systems that get stuff done, and then take it from there. And then the other thing that I really encourage is that, if growth is important to you, most people, everybody's biology is going to be a little bit differently, but, in my world, for example, like the hours, between when I get to the casita and do work for like the next 2 hours, till let's say 10:30 or 11, my capacity to produce is just much better than it is in the afternoon, right? So what am I going to do in the morning? I'm going to focus on marketing. I'm going to focus on growth. I'm going to focus on the creative activities, that the innovation, those things. And so I do suggest that people who really care about growth, they look at their day, they see when their energy is just always typically the highest, and schedule an appointment with themselves in growth. Yep. And don't let that one get sucked up into putting fires out for everybody because it feels so good. That's kind of the downside, is like, oh, I can solve everybody's problems because I'm so good at insurance or blah, blah, blah. Right. And then everybody's like, oh, Michael, you're my hero. You're my fireman. You put a fire out. And it's great. By the end of the day, you've maybe put fires out, but you haven't grown the agency. So those are the kind of, that's my practical strategy for dealing with that stuff.
Okay, good. I like that. As you say, there's a lot of different ways to go about doing this. I think part of it is picking one and sticking with it. But so let's see if we can bring this home a little bit. So we're looking at the next 5 years. Lots of challenges in the business, but you've been around for a long time. I know you're not.
Yeah.
But you've seen a lot, and you're peering, over the edge at the future. If you had a 22-year-old child getting ready to launch, would you recommend the independent agency business to them if they were?
I would say if they were suited for the entrepreneurial life, yes. I'm pretty bullish on it, but I also I think it's not unlikely that we'll see some disruption, particularly in the down market where the policies are simpler and the client's needs are simpler.
Sure.
we could see some disruption there. We could see some loss of market share there. But in general, if it's sort of at the professional level and moving up market, I think it's I think that people have been ringing the funeral bells for the independent agent ever since we've been in this business, right?
Right.
But in spite of, so they threw the internet at us, right? And they said that was going to disintermediate it.
Yep.
And we were going to get knocked out of business. It's an industry that's been just remarkably persistent. The agency part of the industry has been persistent. And I think we're a very long ways away from a replacement for the advocacy, the authority, the education, and the other thing, which is, and this is more important than I think we often recognize, the humanity, the connectedness, the peace of mind that a client gets from feeling like I'm being taken care of by people. I'm in we're a tribal species. It's just the nature of the human being. And so being part of a tribe where we're really, this is why being, feeling like you're part of it, like, you're connected in it, not just a transactional, I bought my policy there, but like you're really part of it. I think that has huge financial benefits for the growth of the agency.
Yeah. Well, I join you in your optimism, and I do think your last point is probably, in my view, it's the most important thing to build on if you're building an agency for the future, because over the last couple of decades, it seems to me that the industry has gone very transactional. Everyone's trying to be transactional, and that's exactly the opposite of what's going to be required to be successful in the future, because people, to your point, increasingly have fewer and fewer human connections because of technology. And so the ones that they do have become more and more valuable to them. And so if you want to have a customer for life, make a friend. Right?
Yeah.
And that used to be, that was how you built your book of business and then your business. And I think we're going to be returning to that even more.
But I think that there's a difference of kind of a magnitude now, because back in the day, a producer, for example, you'd have, relationships with, measured in the hundreds. Okay. Right. But there's some anthropological study around, the kind of the conclusion was that primates, of which we're one, we can have like reasonably close relationships with 141 people, but beyond that, it just gets to be kind of ridiculous. But now we can have relationships potentially with thousands that feel like there's a lot of substance there. We know they're not quite the same, but they can have a lot of substance and a lot of value. And then when, let's say, Tony, you and I have a conversation like this. Okay, so when was the last time you and I spoke other than the podcast? It was like 20 years ago, right? But perhaps if you've read some stuff, saw some videos, heard about me, got my newsletter, whatever, then when we have a real, like a face-to-face, and this one is face-to-face with on screens, right?
Right.
When those conversations surface, they really can feel quite intimate. And so technology allows the savvy insurance marketer to create depth of relationship. And then when it's time for a phone call or a visit, they can just be remarkably powerful. Yeah.
Well, I think you've shared a lot of really practical thinking and advice, and hopefully there's some people out there who are paying a lot of attention to this, and if they want more of it, they know how to get a hold of you, right?
They can visit my website,
and he's everywhere on the internet.
I don't know. I'm not.
No, but you're easy to find. And marketing for the modern age of insurance is one of your vehicles and entities. And you've been a coach to really successful insurance, however you say that. I'm going to have to go practice.
The insurapreneur.
Insurapreneurs for a really long time.
Yeah.
And one of the things, just as a sort of a parting thought, that I've noticed is that really successful people have a coach. I mean, just like really good athletes all have coaches. I mean, Tiger Woods has had a bunch of coaches, as an example. And so coaching is so important to maximizing your own potential. And you're someone who's coached a lot of really outstanding performers, and you're still available to do that. And I hope folks will reach out to you if they want to have a further conversation. But I really appreciate our time today.
Love talking to you.
Yeah, it was fun. I mean, I love being on your podcast. Totally different conversation.
Always good to connect with you, Tony.
It is. So anyway, enjoy the rest of your week, and thanks for being with me. I'm talking to independent agency owners about this all the time. If you'd like to have a more personalized conversation, click on the button or the link in the description, and we'll make that happen. You can also reach out to me at tonycaldwell.net/contact.